Welcome to the Women Leaders Association Daily Member Podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. I'm your host, Julianne Kirkland. And in each Daily Member Podcast, we will pick out a great speaker from one of our meetings that we thought you would enjoy. You can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or find a networking group near you, or if you just need access to the membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Now let's tune in for this incredible message.
All right. So I'm here to share my story with you, my journey, and a couple of tidbits that I've learned along the way. So because it's all about the journey, right? Because Mary also, it started off with Mary saying it's about the journey to the Kilimanjaro. I've not gone to Kilimanjaro. I don't think I've ever, but it is about the journey, right?
We do. Nothing is impossible.
Nothing is impossible. But I do want to say that we do set ourselves up with some goals, but really the goals are not the main thing. It's about what we learn along the way, right? So because the journey is so important, we need to make the journey what makes it exciting for us, right? And also what we believe in, right? And then, sometimes it also gets shaped by the people that we meet along the way, okay? So we can start my story at the end. So as Mary mentioned, I work at Nelson Labs. What Nelson Labs does, it's okay if you have never heard of it, because when I moved to Utah, I was also like, Nelson Labs, what is this? So what they do, they mostly test medical devices, right? Like Mary mentioned, we need to make sure that when somebody comes to me, it's like, okay, I have this new device and it does X, Y, and Z. We got to make sure that when it's actually used on a patient, it's not going to harm them in any way, right? It does what it's supposed to do, right? So I myself, I don't test medical devices. I'm more upfront person, somebody comes to me, Adrienne comes to me, oh my gosh, Helin, I have this great idea for a new medical device. What do I need to do to get it to the market, right? So I'm thinking, I'll look at the device and I try to think, okay, what could go wrong with it, right? And then we prepare a plan to get it, tested and to the market through the FDA or, other regulatory bodies around the world. So we see an exciting part of my work is that I get to see all of these medical devices, right? They start from very simple ones, like stethoscopes, or when you go to the doctor's office and you have the ear odometer, or up to very, very complex devices. I love these little microbeads that you inject into the tumor site where they beam radioactive therapy so that it really does not affect the rest of the body. It only targets the portion that brilliant, So I get to see all of these things. And I feel like that's really exciting about my job, right? And I get to help these people, right? There's these companies that make these life-saving devices for babies. Oh my gosh, I want to support you just because this is how I can support you. Right. And when they get approved, they send me sometimes they send me oh my gosh, thank you, Helin, for helping me through this process. And it could be a year or two later, but they still remember. Right. So it's really a good feeling. Okay. So it's about the journey. Right. So when, Mary was like, oh, where are you from? I'm from Estonia. And nobody knows Estonia because if you look at okay, so here it is on the map right there. Just so you know, now you know. It's so tiny that the population of Estonia, the number of people living there is smaller than the greater Salt Lake. So that's, it's okay if you have never heard of. My husband, who's a very smart guy, he also had not heard of Estonia when we met. So that's okay. Now he knows. So you might ask, how did I end up all the way from there, halfway around the world in Utah? right? And that's a great question because it takes baby steps. Okay. So I think I've been on this crossroads a lot of times in my life. And I feel like that's the point where you're like, oh my gosh, my anxiety is kicking up. I'm a planner. I need to have like a plan ahead. And in a lot of ways, it has helped me through life because I know like, okay, if this is like Kelly was saying, if I get a no, I'm like, that's not an acceptable answer. I got to make sure that I keep on going, right? But sometimes also I feel like if I set a plan, I want to keep that course. And if I derail a little bit, I want to go back to the course. And I feel like sometimes that kind of also hinders me because sometimes you grow along the way and you find other things that excite you that might not be the end of the plan, right? So how do you deal with all these emotions, right? Okay, so I was trying to think about like a couple examples that where I thought me personally, I've grown a lot. Is that when I was in high school, I was like everybody was doing high school and doing this or that, and I was like, I want to do more. So I found this exchange program, right? And I was so excited to write this application. I was like, oh my gosh, I get to spend a year there. It's a scholarship. My mom doesn't have to pay for anything. That's great. But then when I got the yes letter, I was like, oh crap. What did I get myself into now, right? Because one thing is theory, and another thing is actually like living it, right? So my anxiety totally kicked up. I was like, how am I going to survive this? Imposter syndrome, totally. But this year, that one exchange year changed so much about me. You might not know this, but I am an introvert. I was a total wallflower before. But then that year showed me that I have to be independent. I have to make my life the way that I want it to be, right? Nobody else is going to do that for me. And it's like the inner champion that Mary was talking about. It was like really, truly finding that voice, right? And obviously it didn't hurt that I learned English, more than I could have learned in high school, just back where I was. But now, I feel like that was really a cornerstone because it made me think globally, right? I wasn't stuck in my little hometown, but I could see that I can live anywhere, right? And now, I get paid to, speak and write in a foreign language. This is not my native language, right? Okay, so that was really awesome. So I think if you have the opportunity, or if your kids have an opportunity to go see another culture, see another way of living, while, Mary said it very well, we actually realize we're not that different, but that experience of what they do or how they see the world might be really, really impactful for finding your inner voice. Okay. So then, another kind of like directional thing was like, okay, when I started to apply for colleges, right? I was like, what do I want to be? And I had two guidelines. I said, I want to have an impact and I want to discover something, like they did in the old days when they, went to the foreign land and they started to like mission it off and find something, discover something that nobody else has done before. Right? So those are two guidelines. And I was like, okay, I could go to become a medical doctor, right? But the bad thing about that was I couldn't stand the sight of blood. So I was like, okay, I guess that's not it. I also was thinking about becoming a lawyer because I do love a good debate. Me and my husband, we debate a lot. Positive ways. But then I was like, okay, I'm going to do science. So I chose science because it has the impact of like, you can do something that changes the course of how we treat people in the future. It also gave me the opportunity to, because, in science, you always have to like fight for your cause and like really like sit down and convince people that this is the right way of doing it, right? So it's like, oh, the lawyer part can come up here too. And obviously, it was a cool thing to do. All the kids were doing it. Okay, so I went to science, and I have to say, so I spent 10 years in different institutes. Those 10 years really were awesome. I got to spend so much time with brilliant, exciting people, do like cutting edge research. It was really cool, right? Really awesome. But the thing with science is that it's kind of like a lifestyle. It's like a 24/7 thing. It's not there's no off button. It's like trucking. You either do it and you live it, or you don't, right? But I felt like, okay, if I ever want to have a work-life balance, I need to do something about it, right? Another thing is that when you do experiments in science, the default is that it's not going to work. So basically, that kind of starts to like gnaw on your motivation at some point. And because of that, it also moves very slowly. I'm an impatient person. I don't like to wait for things. I need to have them happen now. Okay. So I was like, okay, what do I do now? Because I feel like, okay, I decided maybe it's not the path for me, right? Because I had the path. I was like, I was going to be, I did a doctorate degree, and then I got a really great scholarship to go to postdoc, and then I was going to be an assistant professor, and then like the professor, and be like at the top. And that was a plan, right? But now my plan was not working for me, right? I was like, I got to figure out something else, right? And stepping away from that, because basically I learned all my life to do this one thing, sit and think, and I couldn't do that anymore, right? And I was like, okay, I learned how to use some very fancy equipment, but if I step away from that, what am I going to do? Like, I'm either really overqualified or totally underqualified to do anything else, right? And then I was like, okay, that doesn't sound good. And also, when you have like this group of people around you that all are focused on the same goal, and you then tell them, they look at you like you are giving up, like you're the loser, right? And that's not a really good feeling, right? So I'm like, okay, so what do I do? Do I stay to like please them, or but I'm not like fully invested in it. So like, I don't want to do something, halfway, right? That's not my personality. So I had to sit down, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I need to, know how to transfer some skills because nobody's going to hire me, right? But what made it a little bit easier, it was kind of more like a forced decision, because I met my husband, future husband back then. And then he said, yeah, okay, we got to move to Utah. And I was like, that's great. Because I didn't know anything about Utah. I was like, okay, it's the mountains. So he had family here. And so I was basically forced to leave my previous position anyway, right? So it was either I found another scientific job, or I start from scratch, right? I mean, still two bad options. But so then I had to sit down with the skills, right? Okay, I was like, I know nothing. But then what I realized, actually, leading a project, leading a group of people trying to get to the same goal, that is really leadership skills in people and project management, communication skills. I've been writing, I've been, presenting. That's great skills to have. Troubleshooting, that's like the top thing of being a scientist, right? All of these core skills, those are really what you need to have, the job get done. I mean, I can, learn the little details. Learning is another great aspect of being a scientist, because you learn all the time, right? So I try to just kind of put it out there and think about, okay, what is it that I can do with this skill set? And that's how I found Nelson Labs, and I call it applied STEM, because it is really, I'm trying to get all of these things that I've learned along the way and still have an impact, right? With these medical devices that I'm looking at, I'm trying to make an impact. Another thing I wanted to talk about, which I've seen with my career and also with others around me, like in my team, is that a lot of the time, when you start a company and you look at their like, okay, what can I do? What can I be in 10 years, right? And you see that every company should have a career path, right? Like different ways of how to progress in your career. And that's great for when you start something, but when you plateau, when you hit some sort of like you got the greatest higher up job, what now? What do you do now, right? Because there isn't a career path really for you. I also sometimes think that looking at that thing for somebody who is, middle way through the career, they might be a little bit kind of narrowing their options by just looking at what is out there, right? So what I say is that you really need to look at what you want to do, right? Like when I started at Nelson Labs, I started at the position of doing this risk management and everything. But what I really love to do is be in part of this discussion, this thought leader, right? Part of these discussions of, are we doing it the right way that we're doing it right now? Is it the best way to do it, right? And I don't think it is. I want to shape the world in a way of, is there a better way? Is there a more scientific approach that we can take to do these risk assessments, right? Not just tests, we got to look at it. Maybe some of these tests that are always been done is not the right way to do, right? Maybe there's risks that we have not thought of before, but now we're smarter. Now we can look at it. It's like, if you inject something in your eye, should we check for particulates, and that's not in the standard right now, right? So it has to be a thought process, not something that we've always done before. It has to be individual, right? And that's where my passion lies. So I'm trying to really carve my path to be that person at the company. And I mean, obviously you have to give, your managers or the company, the idea of how is that going to benefit them too, right? But being a thought leader in the industry for our company, I truly believe that they want to be the person leading the world in the way that we see this whole industry, right? Not just doing what everybody else says, right? So I do see that they see the value, and that's how I'm carving my path. Okay. And I think you should too. The last thing I wanted to do, we were talking about these high achievers, right? And I classify myself. I don't want to put myself in a box, but I do see okay, when I've done something, and then it's not the yes, I'm great job. I'm okay, what is the next thing, right? And I feel like that mentality runs deep in our company cultures as well. And that also projects into us, how we see it. So you have to okay, in order to make it somewhere, you gotta think about another way and another thing and another thing, right? And that is coming from the SMART goals, right? We always think and we always hear they have to have SMART goals, which works great when you're building a career. But when you're reaching a point where you're I don't know where this is leading, right? We need to have something else. Something else to supplement this, right? So me and my husband, we've been thinking about this a lot because, he's also a scientist, so we think a lot. The Saturday morning discussions are probably people are okay, what are they doing? Weird. So we've been thinking about it a lot. And when we were kind of trying to decipher what those mean for us, and then we were oh, that's a great idea. And it turns out, actually, there's a book about turning from SMART to WISE goals. I don't know if anybody has heard that, but I was that's brilliant because what that means, WISE goals are not something that you can just tick off. Because SMART goals are, bite-sized things that you can follow a trail of crumbs to get to the palace. But those are more overarching goals that guide you from within, right? That really always should be there if you have the SMART goals, it's great, but that should also be there. So, because, me and my husband, we were thinking about this a lot before we discovered this book. And so I have deciphered the whys, W-I-S-E, for myself as slightly differently than it is in a book, because I came up with those myself. So what they mean is that you have wisdom, right? You look at the world, you try to absorb what it's telling you, and then you think about how can you adapt and also progress in that world, right? The I means introspection. That's from like Mary's talk, where you need to know what is it that drives you, what makes you happy, right? Like, like being present, like we were talking about this like work-life balance. And I was like, oh my gosh, to me, work-life balance means, yes, I'm juggling like 50 million things, but when I'm doing one thing, I'm being present. That's like my introspection that I can really consciously be, okay, I'm playing with my kid. I'm spending maybe 10 minutes, but at those 10 minutes, I'm totally absorbed in that thing. Right? And that helps me, because then I feel like, okay, like at least, I did 100% for that 10 minutes, not, 5% over an hour, and sustainable. To me, SMART goals, again, maybe it's because I'm an overachiever. SMART goals make you feel like you're always running 120 miles an hour. And that's not sustainable. To me, at least, it wasn't. I felt like it wasn't sustainable for me. So these goals should be something that really is like, what is the meaning for your life, right? But that, again, like it should be something that you keep in the back of your mind all the time, that you're not like kind of like sliding away from those when you're doing your other things. And experiential. I am a firm believer that you need to experience all of these things in life to absorb. That's how I learn. I'm a visual person and I experience things. And from those experiences, I feel like I've grown a lot. Like all of these things, like I'm here right now talking to you guys. As I said, I'm an introvert. This took courage for me to stand up here. But it's an experience, right? And it's kind of like more like a muscle. Like I do more of it and then it gets easier, right? And I get enjoyment out of this, right? Even though it's scary. And so I want to leave this with you this thought that I always say, like the one thing that gets me through, like I'm like, is that if somebody else can do it, I can do it. So I want you to say she can do it, I can do it, right? Because I'm like coming from a small town across the world, and I'm here right now in front of you, right? So you can do it too, right? It's about being open to seeing the opportunities, right? Recognizing them. And then, even though it's intimidating, taking that first sticky step, okay? And the more steps you take, they get less.
Hey, my friend, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, be sure to rate, review, and share your biggest takeaway. And if you're wanting more, you can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. You can also get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or networking group near you. Or if you just need to access your membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Because here at Women Leaders Association, we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. That's all for today, my friends. Bye for now.